Everybody. This video is walk you guys through the first essay assignment, and you guys have read a lot of different accounts of this early settler experience from Columbus up to Anne Bradstreet. So what you're going to do is contextualize these works within the larger framework of what is becoming, at this point, a future quote-unquote American identity. So what you're going to do is choose one of the works that you guys read in this unit and develop a written literary analysis of that work using literary elements to guide your analysis. This is things you've probably done in the past. So things like characterization, conflict, setting, etc. I apologize, I realized I said conflict twice there. You want to incorporate contextual elements related to the author's life or the larger historical impact as well. So I'm going to say this very, very clearly. Most importantly, you should be analyzing the text as a piece of literature. Don't let this become a biography essay, and don't let it become a history essay. I don't want to know the biography of Anne Bradstreet. I want to know how you're analyzing one of her poems. And then secondarily, thinking about, just like I do in the lectures, how does their own biography or what's happening historically influence or impact that work? So for example, Anne Bradstreet's own biography as the first transatlantic female poet is very important, right? Her positionality as an author is very important. We wouldn't have the same text from someone else. We wouldn't have the same view or subject matter in those poems from a different author. So just reiterating, don't let it become a biography or history essay. Make sure you keep the focus on the text, but bring in those elements secondarily. So think also about why the text matters. So why is it important that we read Columbus and his views on the native people? Why is it important to read Cabeza de Vaca as a contrast? Why do we need to read Anne Bradstreet's poems and her perspective of what it's like to be in this early settlement as a woman in particular? So think about how the work and the author influence the social, political, economic changes that are happening. So for example, Columbus himself obviously had great influence. So how does his letters convey certain ideas and influence what becomes how we have a relationship with, say, for example, the native people? How did the author work fit or not fit with the new quote-unquote American identity? Now, I realize at this time we are not America, but how do they potentially fit or not fit with this identity that's growing? How do the author and the works help shape those ideals? And then how do they approach certain subject matter? For example, Columbus's approach to the native people is very specific. The way Anne Bradstreet approaches domestic relationships or gender dynamics between a husband and a wife is very interesting. So how does that work achieve a particular social or political goal or message? For example, again, Cabeza de Vaca has a very specific appeal when he's talking about who the actual invaders essentially are as the Christians. So you should have a clear intro with a thesis claim. So this is your argument that you're making about the text. And your main ideas should have good analysis and evidence directly from the text. So that means that you're pulling in quotes that from the text that show your audience what you're talking about. So for example, if I'm talking about Columbus's repeated use of the word I in his syntax, I'm going to pull in a quote that shows that. If I'm talking about Anne Bradstreet's use of, say, a particular metaphor in one of her poems, I'm going to pull out a quote that shows my audience what I'm talking about, and then expand on that in my own analysis. You don't have to use outside sources for this one. You are welcome to if you so choose, but you need to make sure you're citing them in text and on a works cited page. So your essay needs to be 2 to 3 pages in length and is due on Sunday, February 16th at 11:59 p.m. Make sure you meet the minimum page length that's to the bottom of the second page. If you can always write more. If you write less, you will lose points. Make sure you have proper MLA formatting. So that's header in the top left corner with your name, my name, the course and section number and the date, page numbers in the top right. Everything is 1-inch margins all around and appropriately sized font, and the appropriate font type. And then everything is checked for plagiarism as well. So just know that you have access to that plagiarism report the minute you submit it, just as I do. You can resubmit as many times as is needed up until the deadline. So you guys will be assessed in making sure you have good analysis of the work and its major concepts, and then secondarily, inclusion of those historical biographical elements. As I've said, ensure above all else, this is a literary analysis essay. good evidence to support your claims, proper page length, MLA, citations for any included evidence to make sure you have that as in-text citations, and then a fully developed essay structure, like I've said. Make sure, of course, you wrap up your argument with a solid conclusion that wraps up the text and then restates your thesis and main ideas in new words. And then a good organization of your ideas. So some things that you can consider when you're looking at literary elements. You certainly do not want to talk about all of these. I would recommend picking maybe one major one and three, sub elements, I guess you'd call them within that. So, for example, you could focus on characterization, and within that, you could look at things like development, archetypes, etc. Or you could do characterization and some literary devices. So, things like similes, metaphors, irony, and then structure, looking at the dramatic arc, as well as conflict. So that's things like man versus society, the point of view or the narrator. So is it first person, third person, omniscient? Why does that matter? And then you can also look at things like themes or symbols, allusions, and then, like I said, the historical context around the work. So the author's background, the events happening, the ethical, social, or moral issues, so on and so forth. So again, this is purposely broad as far as which work and what you want to talk about within that work, because I want you guys to choose the work that was of most interest to you and the elements within that work that you found most interesting as well. So let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise go ahead and move on. And again, you guys will do an outline with this assignment, so that should help you as you develop out this argument structure.